Hello and welcome to Inside Music Curation. We've got the Feed Media Group music curators here. We've got Stens, Juan, and Mike. Thank you guys so much for joining us. These guys spend their days curating music for businesses. We're a B2B music platform. And then we get together on Wednesdays to talk about what's going on behind music curation, which often includes new releases, new albums, hot artists. And today we are talking about Kendrick Lamar. He had a new album come out last week, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And in our pre-talks, we've had a lot to say, everything from just how mammoth he is as an artist and the album and, how his lyrics relate and take top level views. So we're just going to dive right in. We're going to start talking about Kendrick. We're going to talk about this new album. Who wants to kick it off and share their first reactions to the latest Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers?
Yeah, I'll go. Honestly, so my trajectory with Kendrick is I wasn't a fan at first. It took me a while to actually get into kind of his world. So naturally, when I found out this album was coming out, I really didn't know what to expect, right? And what he gave us was something extraordinary. It was definitely something for the fans. It reflected more of To Pimp a Butterfly than it really did Damn. But you also got some great like pop sensibilities, more in like the delivery as far as like the catchy hooks underlying like the super serious and or very avant-garde kind of music that's going and like swirling around him. I think it's his best work.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm similar to Juan actually, and I think maybe in some respects an even bigger hip hop head. And Kendrick to me was a little bit more challenging at first, as far as his work is so confrontational. I mean, even contrasted with the other Compton greats of like NWA and Ice Cube and some of the others that he's standing on their shoulders. He really forces you to confront society, and he's always just been like brutally honest, I feel like, in his lyrics and everything. But now, having really grown to love his work and just being wide-eyed, open-minded with listening to this, it's another masterpiece. I mean, it's like definitive 4 in a row, like Bow Down. And I think just kind of big picture, and it's a double album, which is really hard to pull off in any genre, but hip hop is famously riddled with like kind of quasi misses. I love Wu-Tang Forever, but it definitely has some padding in it. But this album, I think, just to put like a bow around it, it's perfectly timed. I feel like in terms of where he is on his journey as a person, of being like soulful, searching, and spiritual, like been going through a lot of painful things recently from the sound of the lyrics. And I just think there's a lot of grief, hurt, and renewal in it that is super relatable right now. So I feel like it's as challenging as this album is very accessible, because the grief and the hurt that we're dealing with right now is profound. And I think in comes this album, and he has this ability to synthesize it into universal terms that is very relatable. I think it's going to be like, to me, it's a balm and a way to kind of like work through things, more than like a party album, but it's profound. It's an album I want to live with for a long time.
Yeah, heavy stuff. Mr. Lamar went to therapy for sure. In between these records, and you can hear it in a lot of the lyrics. And I think to what Stens said, there is something for everyone here in a different way than normally. We were talking about this the other day, where when major record labels put a record out, they always want to have something for everyone, whether it's the track for the clubs and the track for the ladies and the track for the bumping in the Jeep or whatever. This album has something for everyone, just in much more in terms of lyrical content, and a lot of it is very heavy stuff. But yeah, people need it right now.
Yeah, I think the word that came to mind when I was listening, especially to the second half of the album, was healing. right? Like it's intense and it's impactful and it's a roller coaster. But I feel like there's a lot of healing in the lyrics and in the delivery of the music. And I think that has a real impact on the listener.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that he's done in some of his other records too. Like when you listen to the lyrics of All Right, it's like not a happy song, but when it's sung back to you, and it's almost how the culture, it's how the community picks up the song, right? Because they end up being kind of like either emotional blankets or some sort of new view to look at to kind of overcome, you know, what keeps us kind of like tied, right, to whatever injustice or anything that goes along with it. So Kendrick does this great thing in this record where it's like he's giving you this picture, and naturally, like right now, as far as like hip hop and really where like just modern music is at right now, is a lot of mental health, you know, the health of the inner person, right? And you know, a lot of times, you know, whether it be like a song about, you know, 1-800-SUICIDE, or it's like something like Ye, who puts out an album that's like kind of like tongue-in-cheek about mental health. Kendrick speaks about like mental health from like a mountain, like Mount Everest, and he's displaying all of these like different situations, different ideas, and kind of just like letting it all out, but then also examining it. What I find so empowering about it is that there really isn't any shame on the record, right? He talks about sexual addiction. He talks about addiction. He talks about a lot of things that normally people wouldn't want to talk about themselves. But in the way that he's saying it, it's empowering, you know? When you think of a song like Savior, you know, and he's saying, you know, I'm not your savior. What do you call it? J. Cole's not your savior. You know, you have to be your own savior. How important is that to hear now in these days? You know, when, yes, we're all trying to help each other, but how are we supposed to help each other when we can't help ourselves? And Kendrick does a remarkable job of displaying that.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw, mental health is super alive right now, you know, and I think bringing it back into hip hop, I just saw a headline that Big Boy is coming out on, you know, supporting some charitable organizations that are trying to like talk more about mental health. I'm gonna have to hand it over to one of y'all for a minute. Sorry.
Get a sip of water, Stens.
I'm also on mute right now because there's crazy construction and plumbing things happening. It's like it's
life never stops, you guys, right? I mean, it's
baby.
just, I think it just ties right into the album.
I know. So
I literally got choked up listening to the album, and now I got choked up talking about the album. So it's like, you know, but I mean, I would yes, and everything Juan said is being so true and perceptive about mental health, and that you know, that's something that I think almost explicitly Lamar bakes into this album of wanting you, the listener, to take something from it that heals you and helps you and serves you. But and not to take it off of that topic, because it's super, super relevant in general to all of us right now coming out of COVID. But I mean, we don't want to make this sound too, you know, challenging and heavy too. I mean, I think that musically there is so much that he's still doing and pushing ground and doing things to make it, you know, inspiring and exciting just musically too. Like you don't have to, that's where he differs from a great poet or a spoken word artist, is that, you know, he is so literary and focused on his words, you know, even if you're kind of almost like agnostic to the lyrics of it, like you're going to have to work with them because they're just profound. But there's always this musical dimension to it too, that you can just vibe on it. And there's a lot of great fun, you know, moments in the album, including at the very, very end after this big, heavy album. And Juan, you referred to it this way yesterday, of basically just literally a pop song in the vein of a modern The Weeknd track or whatever. He sends you out into the world with this song Mirror, which is like a benediction. You go through all this heavy stuff and it's like, here you go, buddy. And it doesn't feel at all forced. It feels super authentic and super, like you said, empowering.
and that lyric at the end is just, it's so good. You know, it's like, and it's funny because now it's escaping me, but I know it's a good lyric, right? It was something like, what was it? It's like, I'm terrible at this. On the spot
we got an interesting comment from Randy who's watching, and he said he's talking about the homework that needs to be done to really get into this. And you guys know the first time we started chatting about this, I was like, I don't know if I get it. And I've listened in these chunks, and I think some of the best advice that Mike gave me is like, you got to sit down and put some headphones and spend some time with it, right? Like if you try to approach this album as background music, I think you're gonna possibly have a different experience depending on where in the album you are, and really miss out on some potentially profound things that you wouldn't hear if you weren't giving it your full attention.
Yeah. Totally. Randy does make a good point. You can kind of almost compare this album to like a prog rock album, and that it is like a concept album of sorts. And yeah, it's you got when you listen, you have to pay attention. Yeah.
It's funny that Randy even says that too. I felt like this album spoke to me a lot like Kid A Radiohead, in the fact that like Kid A is an album about Thom Yorke's divorce, and this album is about where Kendrick is after COVID. And obviously, there's kind of like he's having relationship issues. He's just having issues, right? Kid A has this, it's almost like very sterile sound, but through the melodies and through like the blippiness, you start to get that emotion. And in Kendrick's record, it's like he's utilizing very much the same structures, but the way, like, for example, what is the song? Worldwide Stepper, right? He's rapping like a machine gun, and just the way that he's like, telling us that we're all killers, it just makes it so that like, there is this aspect that you do have to very well pay attention to it. But also, if you're not paying attention to it, there are things that will literally grab your attention.
Yeah, totally. And, well, I want to hear what Mike has to say more about the prog rock thing, because Mike's a big rock guy and has great, pedigree on it. But, the prog rock comment, totally, I think that's a thing of which, you can listen to this album on layer on layer on layer on layer and just spend a lot of time with it. And he's put all this musical treats in there for you to discover, like the best prog rock. I was thinking of, The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall, right? And then like I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, so my personal favorite album of his is his double album, The Fragile, just because there's so much in it, and it's got all these layers to discover and explore, even within the conceptual larger framework. Like this, definitely, I think that was a really astute point from our viewer, that this is really a prog album of sorts, a prog concept album.
Yeah, I mean, and Melissa, this is what I had mentioned to you as well, is like you can't listen to this album, expecting a, song after song, traditionally structured with the verse and the chorus and the great big hook, and then it ain't that. There's something to be said for that. And Stens, yeah, you're right. There are little nuggets, little Easter eggs planted in this album all throughout that you're going to pick up on every time you listen to it. It's true.
Yeah, there's nothing background about it. Like you said, even if you start listening to it as background, something's going to hit you and pull you out of whatever you were doing and into it. And that's really powerful.
Do you guys have, do the three of you, I should include Melissa, because it's interesting to have your perspective on his music really as somebody that hasn't spent a lot of time with him. Do y'all have highlights, if you will, from the album? I mean, this is a first take, conversation. Like I've listened to this maybe in total 5 times. Juan, you probably listened to it 15 because you're a maniac, and I respect that. But I mean, to me, the clear highlights of the album, like top to bottom, beside that last song that I mentioned, Mirror, which by the way, I looked it up. It ends in "I choose you, I choose me, I'm sorry."
I choose me.
The final lyric on the album, "I choose me, I'm sorry," which is, there's so much there that we could potentially unpack. But to me, in addition to that song "Mirror," are "Mother I Sober," I believe that's what it's called, and "Auntie Diaries," which both deal with like really, really raw and really taboo subjects, right? The first one having to do with sexual abuse, right? And like, what are the results of that, and what are the long-term impacts, which is just major, major heavy, right? And the way he does it is so beautiful and sensitive and delicate. And then Auntie Diaries is like, and I've already read a lot of controversy about it, which I respect. There's a lot to it, but it's basically, saying LGBTQ, it's about time. And I'm using me as an example. Me, Kendrick Lamar, is somebody who hasn't been a good example of this, but I'm going to put myself forward now as somebody, I can do better, we can do better, and here's why. So those to me are like really profound musically, but profound culturally too.
Yeah, Juan, I think you were the one that used the term "build back better," as a part of this album. And again, the healing component. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I love about this project is the fact that like Kendrick is giving you obviously a lot of different perspectives, but the crux of the album is about building back better. We all fail. We all have times in our life where we're not 100% secure, or we're making bad decisions. But the point is to, realize that, to take accountability for that, and to build back better. In this record, it's insane. He's dealing with that topic in many different ways, whether it be cancel culture, trans issues, sexual addiction, the multitude of different things that he's talking about on this record. The most important thing about it all is that positive notion of, yeah, everything is kind of wild, but we could do better. We can build back better. And yeah, this record is a slab of that sentiment.
And do you have a standout highlight from the album?
Yes, I do. Oh, I have a couple. So obviously Mirror, we've said that song is lyrically incredible. I honestly have to say Worldwide Stepper. The one of the things that I like to say is like he did it for the culture, right? And a lot of this cancel culture kind of sentiment that is going around, although it's such a convoluted thing, right? Who knows? But I think there's this aspect of forgiveness. I think there's this aspect of redemption that is not really seen. And I'm not talking about like, people that have done wild things, but, for family members and people that, might have just said something not so nice to you, and it's about learning how to, extend that olive branch so that, there's more love in the world than there is animosity.
Awesome. Mike, what were some of the highlights across the album for you?
Well, I think I'm there with Stens, and I think my personal two favorite standout tracks are Auntie Diaries and Mother I Sober, just because I think the first time that I put the album on, I was like, in my place, I was like cleaning up over the weekend, it came out on that Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning them, and it was like, okay, I'm listening passively right now just to kind of see what stops me in my tracks. And both of those tracks lyrically stopped me in my tracks to the point where I was like, whew, like, wow. Okay, this is an album that's very heavy that I need to really sit down and pay attention to and see what else is here, But I also heard, I wasn't sure, like at the end of, spending the weekend with it, I was like, well, no radio hits on this thing. I don't know what they're going to do, but I actually did hear, KCRW, which is the NPR station here in Los Angeles, play Crown a couple of times, and it worked. I think lyrically it worked, and it was, it kind of goes back to my my initial comments of Kendrick definitely went to therapy. Lyrically, the song "Crown" is he's talking about, like, heavy is the head who wears the crown, but admittedly, he over and over again he says, I can't please everybody. So he realizes where he is, where his place is, as one of the goats in the hip hop world, but he's come to terms with the fact that he can't please everybody, and I guess that's a big weight off of his shoulders, I think. So cool to hear on the radio, actually.
And Mike, and one other thing, I think there's a few points in the album where he's almost kind of refuting the crown in a way of, like, saying, there's one other lyric early on where he says you can forget your top fives and stuff like that, where I think the takeaway I'm getting, and it's all interpretive, is that I, as a human being, can't be confined to my contributions as an artist. Like, as big as I am as an artist, and he's never been shy about that, and he's friggin' earned it. Like, I'm bigger as a human than I am as an artist, right? And it's like a reminder, implicitly to all of us, to be authentic to who we are as humans first, which is all coming full circle to mental health. And you made me think of one other thing, Mike, and I'm gonna expose you here, because you said, like, I can't please everybody all the time, and you had a prediction, I think a fun prediction, and you have years of radio to back it. What was your prediction, whether you meant it whimsically or not? What was it about this double album?
I think in a month, Kendrick Lamar is going to drop an album full of just straight radio friendly bangers. Summer's coming. He's got a great big tour coming up. He's got a lot of tickets to sell in a lot of big stadiums. I think this album certainly is not to discount it. We just spent how long talking about how great it is, but, like, this might not be the one that gets people to go and buy the ticket to a stadium show. I think something's coming. Just a prediction. Who knows?
He's had 5 years, so we can only be so lucky, is what I say.
True.
Because we know he has the range to deliver on that, and the bangers would be delicious and nutritious, right? Because he's not really in the habit of serving junk food.
Well, and I do think, you touched on the radios, the radio friendliness of it. And also at Feed Media Group, a lot of what you guys are curating for is fitness, right? And we also talked about, there might not be a lot of great fits in here for fitness. However, again, like, I approached this album, kind of knowing how heavy it was. And then I was pleasantly surprised. Like, honestly, with the healing component, like, I could work out to this. Like, this could make me want to do more. And I think that that's a shift, on a larger level of, we have said time and time, like, pop is top, right? Like, when it comes to curating music for fitness, like, pop music is always on top, positive, reinforcing lyrics on top, but as a global community, there's some serious hurt happening and some healing. And I think that there's some room for popular music and things to take on a heavier tone and be motivating, right? Like the Build Back Better, like, yes, it's heavy and we can do better. And so I found that really refreshing.
I think too that, these days more than ever, music is kind of fluid in its, where it sits. So, like, tomorrow there could be a remix that comes out that's like, oh, okay, this is going to go into our high intensity, training playlist. But yeah, I think that you're right. Lyrically, there are some gems on here that can make people kind of push through a workout, maybe more than they normally would.
Yeah, and Juan, go for it, Stens.
I'm sorry. All I was going to say is that I want to hear from Juan a little bit more about the jazz in this, because, you're a metal musician, but you have so much technical prowess. And I think you mentioned how much there's this jazz infusion in his albums, that he keeps moving forward. But also something we talk about a lot is post-genre pop. Like, this is not in a neat container of pop, right? Or a neat container of any genre. He's like an outcast. He's like the artist outcast. He's like this type of an artist that is just not concerned with, drawing in the lines. He never has been. So, Juan, can you talk a little bit to that? Because I was loving what you were sharing earlier on that level.
Yeah, I mean, So, I mean, if you listen to the implementations of jazz that Kendrick has had throughout his career, you can sense that there's specific tonalities of the jazz that he's using. You know, Damn was funky. To Pimp a Butterfly had that kind of like almost like 70s kind of like revolution kind of jazz to it. This jazz is futuristic. Now, like, and Tyler the Creator's actually, he really produces a lot with like future jazz. But what's dope about it is that it extends itself, or it lends itself really well to more of I don't really want to call it like indie rock or more of the ethereal aesthetics that he's picking up from like things like Bon Iver, Radiohead, or even like what do you call it, Sonic Youth. And then Melissa, you actually picked up a sample that I didn't even recognize.
Yeah, there's a Florence and the Machine sample in there, and he also had the singer from Portishead, right, was featured on the album. So some definite indie ties.
Yeah, and what I also enjoyed about it too is when you really listen to the record, like for example, when you listen to something like Kanye, right? When he does a record, it's like a full new thing, right? It's not really tied to anything. When you listen to Kendrick, his music is tied from minute one all the way to the end. And there's and the jazz is the string that kind of like ties it all together. But I would recommend, if you are really into this album, that you go ahead, check out the other albums and listen to how him and his producers implement jazz into his music and see how different it is from album to album. It's very intriguing and extraordinary.
And I think it's also, you guys were speaking a little to, his artist and humanship and being mammoth, right? And being able to carry people along through these other genres, right? Like not every artist can string jazz through an album like this or take you on these additional journeys.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Melissa. It's a Radiohead. It's it's an Outkast. It's a Prince. Let's not forget Prince. It's a Prince who will like take you maybe at first kicking and screaming a little bit, but then longingly like follow them down whatever path there is artistically that interests them, because that you have, an expert tour guide, and so it forces you out of your comfort zone musically. And it's awesome. Like you all of a sudden are like, I was a fan of, Britpop and, grunge, alternative 90s rock, but now I'm listening to avant-garde, like who's Stockhausen, you know what I'm saying? With Kid A, you're getting into that level, like, and you're okay, this is cool. This is, music is music.
Mm-hmm.
And what effect do you guys think that this album is going to have on the greater community? We know he's not just in the hip hop genre, but what effect is it going to have on that genre, on the community? What do you think we're going to see next, whether it's from him or from other folks that, he's influencing?
I have a theory. It's just a small theory. I think the mental health albums, I don't think we're going to see as much anymore. Only for the fact that, like, after listening to so many of that type of music in the last like 4 years, there hasn't been anything this thorough. There hasn't been anything this wise that's hit like this demographic of people. This is an exceptional slab. But I mean,
I think I disagree with you in that I think that this, you're right. He covered all the bases really well and put a period at the end of the sentence. But I also feel like, in a way, he opened the door wider for more artists to give their sort of personal experiences with some of these issues. I mean, like you said, he touches on everything. But I think that there's opportunity here for people to expand on it and share their own. And I look forward to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, to balance both your points, because I agree with both of them, and I don't actually think that they're dissimilar, is that I think this is such a powerful summation of these mental health issues in one respect, Juan, but simultaneously, you know, opening the door on so many other things. And I think one of those doors that I'm the most excited about, you know, and as a company, we're working a lot on diversity, inclusion, equality, and belonging. And so it's really, and as a longtime hip hop lover, right, who has wrestled and continues to wrestle with the misogyny and entrenched homophobism of it, which those aren't part of my personal belief. I'm very, very excited that he has the bravery to come out on record in provocative ways to force us to grapple with these issues, and that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's the zeitgeist, because this gender fluidity and more identity fluidity it's really good to us all as human beings to have that, to live in. I look at my son who's 8 and loves pink and doesn't care if he's playing with cars or dolls. But I also think that that's exactly what artists that are doing the most, you know, beloved pop music right now are doing. Dua Lipa, Lil Nas X, Harry Styles, etc. They're pushing this gender fluidity and identity fluidity, and I'm very excited about that.
Right on.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm really excited to see, you know, what's next. I'm excited to see how this album plays out, where things land, what's next from Kendrick. Thank you guys so much. Anything else that you guys want to go out in closing, or, you know, highlights or tips for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience listening to Kendrick, you know, in addition to this album, other things they should be listening to, checking out?
Just marinate in it. His music is for marination, I feel like, because, and not to go at odds with the thing you have to really pay attention, but like, it's going to take a while if you're not a fan, if you will, because it's deep dish. His music is deep. Sorry, I've been having trouble all day. I'm choked up. His music is deep dish. So just marinate in it and you'll get there, you know. And if this is a little bit too much, I wouldn't recommend that a fresh Kendrick Lamar fan go and bite off this album. I would say check out Damn or check out parts of Mad City, because it's just a little bit more of an easier foothold into it. But there's a lot there. It's for a lifetime of listening.
Yeah, exactly what Sten says. It's literally a lifetime of listening. There's so many things that could be enjoyed over and over again on this album. For someone who is not familiar with Kendrick Lamar, it could be very intimidating, especially with all of the, the kind of like the backlog of stuff that comes along with being a Kendrick Lamar fan. But the great thing about it is Kendrick is someone who may not be someone for you right now, but in years to come, it could be. You know, his voice is timeless. It really is.
I can't wait to see how he pulls this album off live. Like, how are you gonna do it? How are you gonna do it in the stadium? I'm getting tickets to the LA area show for sure, and because I need to see how he's gonna translate this collection live. Got to see it.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Sure.
Well, thank you guys, as always, for your expertise. If you aren't familiar, these guys are full-time music curators here at Feed Media Group. We're a B2B music platform. We curate music for fitness and apps and digital experiences. Please check us out at feedmediagroup.com. Be sure to check out Kendrick Lamar if you haven't already, and keep in touch. We're back here every other Wednesday talking about all things music curation. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Melissa.